Greetings, people of the interwebs. Jake here. It's been a while since I last did one of these. Been kind of busy lately, and it's just hard to schedule guests and stuff like that with different time zones and everything. But joining me today is the one and only Leonie Panda.
Hi.
How are you doing today?
Yeah, I'm doing great. How are you doing?
Pretty good. I'm pretty much just now waking up, so hopefully my brain will be functional. So let's go ahead and dive into this. Was there like a moment that first kind of got you into comics? Just because it seems like most people, they kind of got introduced to like the comic characters or medium or something like that through like some of the TV shows or some of the movies, or did you just jump right into the comics?
Well, the movies kind of helped. It's kind of weird because, or funny I should say, I always thought comics were totally for nerds because all I knew about comics were from TV shows, and everything I saw about comics had to do with nerdy people who were geeky and, I don't know, not the cool kind of people anyway, so I didn't want to do anything with that. I wanted to be one of the cool kids. Well, unfortunately, that didn't happen. But then I did meet a really cool guy though, and he was a really huge comic fan, and he actually took me to watch Watchmen in the cinema.
Ooh, that's a great choice.
And I was amazed by that movie. I was like, wow, this is what comics is. And when the movie stopped and I just looked at him, he seemed disappointed. Like, well, the comic was better, but well, it was even better than that. I have to read that. So, yeah, I picked it up later. I read it. It was fantastic. So, ever since then, I've been looking into comics. That's
really cool. Just because, with most people, they kind of started off with, like, Batman or Superman, Spider-Man, like, the big, stuff. But I like the fact that you started off with Watchmen, and especially the fact that, like, you're watching the movie for the first time, loving it, and then, like, your friend is kind of like, yeah, it's not as good as the comic book. And again, that's a typical like comic book reader thing to do, where like after they see the movie,
true.
It's kind of like, that was good, but not as good as the comic. They did that differently, and it's just kind
I have become that person.
Yeah, I think everybody's become that person at some point, but I think that also goes to show just like how much the comic world has to offer. Especially outside of like the big two companies like Marvel and DC, even though Watchmen are an imprint of DC and are now a part of the main DC continuity. But it's still the fact that like it isn't just like superheroes and stuff like that. Especially when you dive into like the indie comics. And there's also been tons of movies made on indie stuff like V for Vendetta, which is one of my all-time favorites. Scott Pilgrim, Watchmen. Dread, and because like I'll tell people it's like that was based off a comic book, and they're like, what? It's like, oh man, I might need to start reading the comics. I'm like, yeah, you should, because if you like the movie, usually the comics are better.
Yeah, I'm watching the TV show Happy right now, and it says that was based on a comic too, and I've never heard of it, but I should probably check it out because it's a pretty good, it's a pretty cool TV show.
What's the TV show?
Happy.
What's that
it's
about?
It's on Netflix. It's about this kind of gruffy kind of ex-cop who is now pretty much just a killer for hire. But then he meets this kind of fuzzy unicorn creature who apparently is the imaginary friend of his daughter who is in trouble and he needs to save her. But it's gritty and it's funny and I think it's very well done.
Just based off that little description, this sounds amazing and I need to watch this. Because it sounds really weird and out there, but those seem to be like some of my favorite like comics and stuff like that. So I'm gonna check that out. And it's just called Happy?
Yeah, with exclamation mark.
Okay, and I guess for those of you listening, there's a recommendation for you all as well.
I think that's the fun thing about comics. They sometimes have really out there concepts, but they always seem to work.
Yeah, Scott Pilgrim, like that's because basically like the comics is kind of like a combination of like manga, video game references, pop culture, and like somehow everything just works perfectly. Same thing with the movie. Like the movie, I was just like, there's no way you can turn this comic into a movie and it'll work. Yet somehow the amazing Edgar Wright perfectly adapted that comic, and after I saw the movie, I was just blown away. And I'm like, good God, this movie is just amazing. So I guess it's safe to say that like Watchmen was the first comic that you actually read after.
Well, it might have been Gotham City Sirens 2. I don't really remember the time frame, but I read that because I was getting into cosplay and I liked Poison Ivy, but I didn't know anything about her, so I was like, I should probably just read the comics, you know?
Oh,
so I picked that up and forgot about the cosplay stuff because I am horrible at sewing. So, yeah, I just continued reading the comic and, yeah,
That's
I really loved it.
That's actually a really cool way of getting into comics. To basically do research for a cosplay and then just be like, yeah, I'm fine with just reading the comics now.
Yeah.
So like, how long have you been reading comics up to this point now?
Must have been like 8-9 years.
Okay, so quite a while.
Yeah.
Do you have a preference between like Marvel, DC, or like any of the other companies, or is it kind of just like time of day, where one day you're feeling more Marvel, the other day maybe more DC?
At the moment, I veer too much towards Image most. But if you want to know about between the big two, I'd say at the moment DC used to be Marvel. I read a lot of Marvel Now stuff. I read Deadpool and Black Widow, Hawkeye. But yeah, at the moment I just feel like the stories of Marvel have kind of lost their spark, you know? And yeah, I really like DC at the moment. I'm reading Green Arrow and it's absolutely amazing. I love that series.
Oh yeah.
And
is Benjamin Person still writing it?
Yeah, he is.
Yeah, because I love the way he wrote. Started off Rebirth, and really a lot of the Rebirth stuff was fantastic. But I love the chemistry that he writes between Black Canary and Oliver, because Green Arrow is my favorite DC character, and I always loved his interactions with Black Canary, and I think he really nails like their relationship together. So I loved reading Rebirth from what I did read, just because again I love Green Arrow and I like the chemistry between him and Black Canary.
Yeah, me too. I think Green Arrow really needs Black Canary to kind of set him in his spot sometimes. Like once in a comic she said, well, you can't fight the big man when you are the big man.
Yeah.
And I thought that was really fitting.
Yeah, she does kind of keep him in his place. Well, and they also kind of just balance each other out really well. Because, he's... again, he kind of does have that whole thing where he kind of takes the persona of Green Arrow a little too far and kind of forgets the fact that it's like, well, yeah, you're super rich, dude, so, like, you're kind of part of the problem in a way. So I do like the fact that, again, she'll kind of call him out and be like, yeah, look, you man, that's like calling the kettle black. So like do you have like certain storylines in Marvel or DC that you've really kind of latched onto, throughout, whether it be like Rebirth or New 52, Marvel Now, or some of the other stuff?
Well, I gotta say, I don't read one title or one character consistently. I just kind of hop from character to character because I want to know stuff about them. So I read the storyline and then move on to the next one. So I don't really have one storyline that's really most important to me.
Oh, okay, that's really unique because most people tend to stick to certain characters or storylines. So do you have favorite characters or like ones that you would like to read more of in either Marvel or DC?
Oh yeah, I have a huge, huge list of that. I mean, I'm always up to read more about Green Arrow or Hawkeye. I love them both.
Mm-hmm.
Same as well, let's see, Black Widow. Now I gotta think. I mean, Batman is always great to read.
Have you read Green Arrow Longbow Hunters by Mike Grell?
Yeah, that was actually one of the first Green Arrow comics I read.
Okay, yes, because that is fantastic.
Yeah.
I
actually met Mike Grell. He's a really nice guy.
Really?
Yeah. It was the first Comic Con I went to, and he was just sitting there at his table on his own. Seemed kind of bored, so yeah, I just walked up. He signed my Longbow Hunters copy, and yeah, he's a really nice bloke.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, yeah, it was one of the better moments at the Comic Con for me.
I don't know. I feel like that's kind of a shame that like not a whole lot of people were like crowding around his booth, because I'd probably be the one that like after getting like my like copies of like comics signed, I'd probably be like, okay, guys, you need to like start crowding over this guy. You need to, and first off, you also need to read Longbow Hunters and his entire '80s run on Green Arrow. This man knows how to write the character. Because really prior to that, like he had, Green Arrow hadn't had a whole lot of like solo runs. Like a lot of them were like team ups with like Green Lantern or like limited runs, and really for the longest time, he was just seen as like a Batman ripoff, which initially he kind of was. But I like the fact that he kind of took over the character and made him more like a basically Robin Hood, just like in the DC world. I think one of the, I think it was like volume 6 maybe. He actually goes to Nottingham, because he's a big green Robin Hood fan. And there's even like I think one panel where he actually meets John Constantine, which I thought was really cool. Just because like as I'm reading, I didn't expect to see like Constantine, because like really the only character I think he crosses over with in throughout the entire run, or at least from what I've read, it was like Hal Jordan. Yeah, I think Hal Jordan was the only one. But then like Constantine is just like sitting in this pub randomly. I was just kind of like, what? Is that John Constantine? I was like, damn, that is awesome. So for those of you listening, looking for some Green Arrow comics, definitely start off with Longbow Hunters and then continue on with Mike Grell's amazing '80s run, because it's just
definitely, because he's not just a great writer, but his art is fantastic as well.
Oh yeah, like very detailed. Like it. Again, it's darker, but it's still like it doesn't take the whole. Because I've got a huge problem with the Arrow TV show where it's too soap opera drama and like Oliver's too broody. And it's like, if you want to take the character in like kind of a darker, grittier direction, that's fine. But like in Mike Grell's run, like Green Arrow is still very much that kind of smart-ass, quippy character, whereas like in the show, he's just all broody and kind of depressing. So it's kind of like, I don't know, I like the fact that he just took it in like a grittier direction and more realistic, but he didn't change the character at all. He just put him in like more, realistic kind of grounded scenarios.
Yeah, and that's what I tend to like with superhero stories, that they're more realistic.
And I think it does really work with certain characters, because that's one thing that I really liked about like Captain America Winter Soldier is I'm like, oh, that's not only a really good Captain America movie and a really good comic book movie, but it's a really good movie just as a standalone movie. And really, like, you could take out like the name of Captain America and like S.H.I.E.L.D. and stuff like that, and it still stands as like a good spy espionage thriller.
Yeah, true.
But also, like, it depends, because like Superman I don't think would work as well in like trying to ground it in reality, because it's like, well, he's basically an alien god, so you can't really ground that a whole lot in reality. So like, what are cause you said that you've kind of moved on to, or been reading a lot of Image. That's probably my favorite company. Like as far as like comic distributors, so like what are some of your favorite Image titles that you've read or are currently reading?
Well, I'm catching up on Saga and
Saga's awesome.
East of West too, Nailbiter. I love all of those. I love those series. They're fantastic.
Oh yeah, pretty much
And
anything by Brian K. Vaughan is like pure gold. And I don't know how he's able to write for like all these different comics, totally different genres, and they're all amazing.
yeah, it's really impressive.
Um, who writes Nailbiter? 'Cause that's one that I've been meaning to check out for a while.
Oh, I really don't know from the top of my head.
Okay, so that's been one that always pops up on like my recommendation. Like it's usually like I buy my comics online since there's in a comic book store near me. And it's one of the ones that always pops up of like, hey, you might like this one. And it's like every time I'm kind of like, maybe I might check it out, but I just haven't caved in yet and gotten it.
Well, you probably should though.
That might be next on my list. Because I still have like a couple, actually, 3 trade back volumes I still need to read. One of which is a Brian K. Vaughan book, We Stand on Guard. I only read the first issue. It's basically if the U.S. and Canada like went to war, and like it takes place in like 2100 something, so it's like in the future. But basically, the U.S. and Canada go to war with each other, which I thought was a cool premise in of itself. But just based off the first issue, I was really digging it, and because it's Brian K. Vaughan, so I was just like, I'm in. Like, you just have to say Brian K. Vaughan. You don't have to tell me the premise of the comic. Just be like, Brian K. Vaughan wrote this. I'm like, all right, give it to me. I'll read all of it.
Mm-hmm.
Have you...
Cool Image comic I've been reading is Analog. I've only read the first issue, but it's about a world in the near future where the internet got nuked basically. So everything you do or say is either just out in the open for everybody to see, or you go back to the old days, go analog, as some of the older people do. And the story so far, it's basically just it seems to be a spy thriller, and it's really cool. And I read it right around the time of the Facebook scandal going live, and there's a character in there that's exactly Mark Zuckerberg, so that was very funny to read.
So it's very topical.
Yeah, I don't think that Duggan, the writer, really expected his comic to be that relevant that soon when he thought of the idea. It must have been very fun for him to when that news broke.
Again, like that kind of goes to show that like the beauty with like all these indie titles is again you can take like these kind of stranger or just like different ideas and like write about that. That's kind of again the appeal for me with indie stuff is because again I love my Marvel and DC, but overall I like just kind of these newer different ideas like that curse words comic that like I posted a review of. I just loved like so when I read the description because again it popped up on like my recommended like hey you should check this out and I like the cover because it's just like some wizard dude with a staff and a koala on his shoulder, so I'm like what's going on here? So then I read the description, and it was kind of like a wizard teleports into our world warning the people of like this evil danger coming to destroy it. Or maybe he's the evil danger, and he's just here to hang out. And he also has a talking koala. And I was like, I can't not read this. This sounds amazing. And then sure enough, I read it. What?
When I saw the title in in the subscription list, I was like, sounds interesting. And then I saw the cover, and I was like, okay, I need to read this.
Yeah.
Because it was just some hipster dude with a really long beard sitting on a motorcycle with a koala on his shoulder. So yeah, that was so out there. I just needed to check it out.
And it works like just perfectly. Like as you're reading it, like again, like because I don't think it really explains how like Margaret the koala like is able to talk. It's just one of those things where like yeah she talks and you're like yeah okay talking koala cool.
Yeah.
And like I also love that like every time it shows Wizard, the main character, like doing something, it's kind of like where's Margaret? # Team Margaret. Cause it's got like all the people on like Twitter and social media kind of commentating on whatever Wizard's doing. But like it's like every panel there's that one person, the team, Team Margaret, He's always kind of like, I like Margaret better when she was a koala and not a bird. Hashtag team Margaret.
Yeah, and I really think the art is what does it for me. That just ups the level of the whole book because it's so vibrant, so colorful, and yeah, it's just amazing.
Yeah. So again, like for those of you who like again, you're looking for like a good comic to read, especially if you're into weirder stuff. Curse words, I can't recommend that enough, just because, and also like if you're not already piqued, like your interest is piqued just by the description of this and the fact that there's a talking koala. I don't know what I can do more to like sell you on this comic.
I mean, there are a lot of wizard battles. I mean, that's pretty awesome.
Yeah, wizard battles, people shooting like shooting spells at each other, flying in the air, and also I thought it was really cool that like Wizard's powers are based on like his beard, basically.
Yeah.
Like I guess sort of spoiler, kind of in a way, but like basically at one point he temporarily like loses his powers and like he just loses his beard entirely. I just thought that was like such a weird and cool concept that like, but I guess it kind of makes sense because typically wizards in fantasy, again, they're depicted with like long, like glorious flowing beards. So I just thought that was like really cool that like his power is based on like his beard.
I thought it was funny that he just started wearing a fake beard then.
Yeah, he started wearing that fake beard.
It really reminded me of the I don't know if you know them, a band called The Beards.
I don't.
Oh, this is band consisting all of dudes with, just rather impressive beards. And they're pretty much, well, if you don't have a beard, you're not a man. That kind of stuff. And there's this guy in the band who has this fake beard on. And then at the end of one of the shows, he just ripped off the beard, and it was just a huge beard underneath. It was so hilarious to see.
I'm gonna have to check out this band now. But yeah,
Well,
like. But after reading Curse Words, I'm kind of like, okay, I need to keep my beard then, because I've kind of been considering like trimming it. But then after reading that, I'm like, okay, clearly beards is the source of power, so I'm just gonna keep rocking my beard and hopefully grow it like as long as wizards and just become like a kick-ass wizard man.
That's what long beards are for, right?
Yeah. Like, that's just kind of my general rule. Like, if some old dude approaches me with, like, a long flowing beard and gives me worldly advice, I'm like, okay, you know your stuff, because you've lived on this planet for quite a while. Whereas, like, if some clean-shaven 20-year-old guy came up to me with the same advice, I'd be like, shut up, man, you don't know stuff. So what are some other indie stuff that you've read that you've really been liking?
I mean, all of the Vertigo stuff. I mean, that's always good.
What is it?
You can't go around like things like Sandman or Hellblazer, Fables.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah,
Just
Fables.
too good not to read.
Yeah, especially so I liked because I read a little bit of New 52 Hellblazer. I don't liked it well enough, but like that Jamie Delano run, like the initial like Hellblazer run from I think it was like the mid to late 80s is just absolutely fantastic.
Yeah.
So again, for those of you wanting like a nice kind of darker fantasy, like supernatural magic comic, or if you're just a fan of or want to dive into like the Constantine character in the comics, definitely check out Jamie Delano's Hellblazer. And I think you can get like the omnibus, which is like this massive tome of probably the first I don't know, like 20, 30 issues or something like that. And it's amazing. Like there really isn't like a bad portion, at least from what I've read of like that initial run. So yeah, here's some reading recommendations for you listening, especially again for you wanting to dive into like indie stuff or the kind of imprint of Marvel or DC. But I actually haven't read Sandman yet. I'm a little ashamed to admit.
I mean, you can't read everything, but...
True, but like I try to like veer towards like kind of the iconic, like what are some of the like kind of must reads for any comic reader. But I just haven't gotten around to Sandman yet.
Yeah, Sandman is definitely one of those.
But really, Neil Gaiman just in general is a fantastic writer.
Honestly, Sandman is the only thing I've really read of him.
Oh, so you've only read Sandman by him?
Yeah.
Well, he writes American Gods, doesn't he?
Yeah, he does, and it's on my reading list, but boy, it's really long.
Yeah, that's another thing that's kind of I guess why I haven't jumped on Sandman quite yet is because it's very lengthy, and so most of the time I just get like several trades, and then I wait for like a day off, and I just like binge read them. But sometimes like when they're like that massive, I'm kind of like, ooh, might need to wait till like a whole weekend and just shut myself like in my room and put my headphones in and just do nothing but read to get through
But
that.
a lot of the Sandman stories, I think you can read them on their own very well. I don't think you need to really read the entire trade to remember and get the entire story.
That is true. I think most of them are fairly standalone. I think they just like loosely all connect.
I mean, aside from the first trade, that is, but.
So I don't know. That's one that keeps eluding me. Even though every time I'm looking to get new comics, I'm like, maybe this is the time I'll get Sandman.
Yeah, but it's really completely different than from any other comic I've read.
Do you have any like favorite comic book movies or TV shows, whether it be like Marvel, DC, or some of the indie movies?
Well, as of late, Jessica Jones is one of my favorite TV series. I think the themes, how they're handled, it's just absolutely fantastic, and I can really relate to a character, even though I'm nothing like her. And I think that's really great.
That is really impressive to where someone can relate to a character when they're nothing like them. But also, again, like, just hats off to the people who did both seasons of Jessica Jones. I think I might like the first one a little bit better, but I was really surprised at how much I like Jessica Jones because I knew really nothing about the character going into the first season, and that was like right after the first season of Daredevil, which was incredible. But I think Jessica Jones is like on par with the first season of Daredevil in terms of like quality and the fact that I was just like gobbling up every episode. I'm like, I need more, and probably finished the first season in like 2-3 days because it was just that good.
Kilgrave was just one of the first characters I was truly terrified of, so I thought that was very impressive. That does not happen fast.
But and that's another thing that I love about the Netflix shows, especially with villains like Kilgrave, is because like you could almost like see where like you could see where he's coming from to where like he doesn't see himself as a villain. That's just his kind of way of life, and probably at this point, like he's just so used to using his power, he doesn't even realize he's using it. Which is one thing that I really like that they brought up in the first season is, again, like he probably is so used to it, he's just not aware that he's even using his powers. And I think part of it too is just the fact that I really like David Tennant, but like there are moments where like Kilgrave would be doing these terrible things. I'm like, oh, Kilgrave, you silly goose. And I still am kind of liking the character, and I'm like, why do I like this guy? He's doing heinous, awful things.
It's really weird because, I know David Tennant from Doctor Who, and there was still some part of Doctor Who lingering in Kilgrave, and that made me kind of sort of like him, but he was so completely different that he was also just terrifying because of what he did and what he had done.
Yeah, so like that, and again, I think a lot of that is the fact that casting David Tennant, who's just an incredible actor outside of like Doctor Who and Jessica Jones, but yeah, like again, I think there was that moment where I think he told somebody to like, I forget what it was, but like when he told like those housekeepers or something like that, he told them to like poke their eyes out or something, like just something like horrible and terrible. But as the way he said it, I kind of chuckled, and I was kind of like, oh, I'm a terrible person because I laughed at that. But again, I think a lot of it was just David Tennant and his delivery of the lines. But yeah, Jessica Jones is absolutely incredible. And season 2, it's almost completely different from the first season. But I like that.
I do have to say that I really really did not like Patsy in season 2.
No.
So I hope she's going to get a better arc in the 3rd season.
Yeah, because I kind of hated her by the end of season 2. Like, she just kind of kept going downhill further and further, and I'm like, okay, maybe that's just part of her arc where, like, she kind of does some questionable things, but then she redeems herself. But then, no! She just keeps getting worse, and I'm like, what are you doing? So yeah, she was awful.
Yeah, totally. So she better be redeemed in season 3.
Like, not minor spoiler maybe if you all haven't seen season 2, but hopefully you all are caught up with all the shows. But if for whatever reason you haven't, like, watch Jessica Jones. It's really, really good. I also thought it was cool that in season 2 they had, like, all the episodes were directed by females, which I thought was really important, not just for the character of Jessica Jones, but also just in this day and age. It's kind of like, yeah, well, why aren't there more female directors out there?
You can really tell in the show that it's written and directed by females. I mean, I could relate to this character in a way that I haven't been able to relate to a character ever.
Mm-hmm.
And that says something, because most of the films I've watched, because I love action and I love I love sci-fi,
Mm-hmm.
and most of that is directed by men. And they wrote a female character in a way that I can actually relate to her, instead of her just being a man with boobs, basically.
Yeah, because there have been cases where, like, again, some and like even if, like, the show or movie you're fine is good, sometimes, like, they'll write the female protagonist or characters kind of, I guess especially, like, with fight scenes, like, they'll have, like, these female characters fight in, like, high heels. Don't
get me started on that.
I've never worn high heels, but they look incredibly uncomfortable, and I don't see how someone can walk, let alone fight in those things. But, like, yeah, those are moments where I'm kind of like, I don't think they're aware of how that works. They're just kind of like, yeah, that'll look cool. Have her, like, kick the dude in those high heels. But again, I don't know. Maybe there's a secret technique to wearing and fighting in high heels. I don't know.
I don't think as many women will know it than that is shown in movies. No, but the way Jessica Jones handled women's issues, and especially in season 1, I just could relate to that so much. And I just thought it was fantastically done.
Oh yeah, and it also, I feel like it could have been very easy for the writers of Jessica Jones and, like, the showrunners to kind of, I don't know, make it a little too, like, kind of pandering, or kind of be too much. I'm trying to find the best way to put this. But, like, I don't know, they could have easily made it too much like, yeah, girl power. Which, not that that's a bad thing, but I think, if you're, depending on how it's handled, I don't know if any of this is making sense. Hopefully it is. Otherwise, people will probably, I don't know, judge me harshly.
No, I get what you're saying.
But, like, the fact that Jessica Jones, like, she was a strong female character, but they weren't, I don't know, like, really, but, I don't know. I don't know. I don't even know what I'm trying to say anymore. But I just
lost your train of thought.
Yeah, I guess I just like the fact that she's a strong female character, and they didn't, like, overdo it. She was just like, yeah, she's a strong female character. There you go. Like, that's all. That's it. Like, we're not trying to, like, overdo this concept or anything like that. I think that's what I was trying to say.
Yeah, no, I get what you're saying. I mean, the whole girl power thing, that's often way more obvious in, like, kids shows or something meant for girls. And usually with stuff for adults that has women in it, then they're really just treated as a man.
Yeah.
And women's issues are just really not discussed. And it's something that did appear in Jessica Jones, which I was very happy about, and they did it well too. So there's another bonus.
Yeah, and they really didn't shy away from, like, her basically post-traumatic stress for like what she went through, which it is at times kind of hard to watch just because like of all the terrible things she had to go through. But at the same time, I like the fact that they didn't really hold back. They're kind of like, yeah, this is like real stuff that people have to deal with, not necessarily the superhero aspect, but like some of the other things that Jessica Jones went through. You know, like the fact that like again, it's kind of like, yeah, she's a very damaged, broken person going through post-traumatic stress basically, and that's like a big part of her character, and that's kind of why she's an alcoholic. So even though she's again like not exactly the best person, or even definitely not the best hero, it's still I like the fact that they write her to where she's still likable and you're still rooting for the character, even when she does questionable things or things where you're like, that's a terrible idea, but you're still like, but I get where you're coming from and I support you. So what were some of the other movies and TV shows that you said you liked?
Well, Logan is by far my favorite comic book movie.
Oh yeah, like I can relate to that because even though I'm not an old man, like physically, I'm an old man at heart. So yeah, when I was watching Logan, I'm like, yes, that's me.
I mean, it's in the name, right?
Yeah, exactly.
No, but yeah, that movie was so completely different from the other comic book movies, and especially the superhero movies I'd seen before, and it was exactly what comic book movies needed at that moment.
Oh, exactly.
Because I feel like a lot of comic book movies are kind of the same. They follow the same path, the same storylines, and this was completely different from that. It was in a different genre and I think that's important to really diversify the movies.
Especially with, because again, like, arguably, like, we've obviously had superhero movies and comic book movies for decades now, but I think around like 2008 to 2010 is like when we got to the point where we get like several comic book movies from Marvel, DC, indie stuff like a year. I think especially now when we get like 3 Marvel movies a year, 3 DC movies a year, I do like the fact that Fox were able to take a big enough risk and be like, all right, we're going to do an R-rated Wolverine movie, which that's what I've been wanting pretty much since day one. Because that's... Because, I love the character of Wolverine, and I think they finally did the character justice by being like, all right, just let him loose. He can chop people's arms off. He can, because, like, a lot of times in the comics, he's fighting, like, Sentinels or robots, and so it's like, it's still cool to see him, like, slice and dice Sentinels or whatever, but it's like, I don't know, since it's, a bit more family-friendly, he can't go all out. But also, I like the fact that Logan is basically this man who has more or less been immortal for like the last 300 years, 300 years, and he's finally kind of dealing with the fact that like he's slowly dying. So it's a very human story, even though clearly he's a mutant. But that's kind of the beauty of the movie, is like it's a very like human, emotional story that like anybody can relate to in some form or fashion. But it's still very much a comic book movie, and kind of a neo-Western, which I'm a big fan of Westerns, so I was kind of like, but yeah. And also it's probably...
it was really a movie about hope, especially with a person who has lost all of it and he finds it again. And I thought it was very nice.
But so sad that like again he dies at the end after finally kind of being like, there is hope.
I wept.
Yeah. And also Daphne Keane, the actress who played Laura, that was her first movie. I thought she did phenomenal.
Yeah, she was great.
But really the whole cast, like that's one of the best like performances I've seen from Hugh Jackman. That's probably the best performance I've seen from Patrick Stewart, who plays Professor Xavier. And I really do think it's a shame, like, not just being the comic book fan and throwing my personal bias in the mix, but I do think it's a shame that, like, neither one of them got nominated for, like, an Oscar at all. Because, again, like, that's some of the best acting I've seen from them, but I think a lot of that is the Academy just being like, it's a comic book movie. Surely there's no great acting performances or story in that movie. And it's kind of like, no, like, when you... Because, again, like, Logan's another one of those movies where, like, you can take out, like, the name of, like, the X-Men and, like, the characters, and it's just it's a really great movie that just so happens to have Wolverine as the lead actor, basically. Same thing with, like, Dark Knight. Dark Knight is a great, like, crime thriller, and Batman just happens to be, like, the lead actor, and same thing with the Joker. But you could easily take those characters out and replace them with just character A, character B, and that movie still holds up and is still a fantastic movie. I think that's also kind of the key to continuing this whole this amazing golden age of comic books, comic book media we're living in now. Is it's like you kind of have to change the genre. It can't just be like superhero versus bad guy, good versus evil, that whole thing back and forth over and over again. You have to do like a Deadpool or a Logan or like a Captain America, Winter Soldier, or Dark Knight, where it's like it's basically a different movie, and they just kind of layer it with comic book characters and like some things from the comics, but it's basically like a neo-western or a crime drama or something like that.
Mm-hmm. I was just thinking what other genres they should make superhero movies of, and then I just remembered that sketch from I don't remember what show where they made a Black Widow movie, but then of course it was a romantic comedy.
A romantic comedy Black Widow movie?
Yeah, I mean she's a female character, right? So yeah, it has to be a romantic comedy.
Although Marvel there hasn't been a romantic comedy superhero movie yet. I'm not saying like that should be the Black Widow standalone movie. That'd be a terrible idea. But it's kind of like, yeah, that's a subgenre that they haven't tapped into yet. I don't really know what characters you could do for like a romantic comedy though, at the top of my head.
Yeah, I mean.
But I'm sure that there's like a Marvel or DC character or something like that they could make into a romantic comedy. Although, what was it? I think it was Duminati maybe. Like was saying that when we did our interview a while back, was saying that like he would like to see like a Doctor Doom and who was it? Magneto maybe, like a kind of like a buddy road trip movie with those two.
Oh, that would be awesome.
Yeah, like those shoes just like cutting loose, like not being like all villainous, but them just going on like a road trip somewhere. And I was just like, yeah, that would be awesome because I love those two characters in general. Like they're two of my favorite kind of Marvel villains. Because Magneto, you could even argue, is really not even a villain, just more of an anti-hero. But even still, it's the fact that I just love that those two characters are very fleshed out. They aren't these kind of one-dimensional villains. Like they have these tragic backstories, and that kind of leads them to become the villains that they are and the characters. So it's like even though when they're doing terrible things, you're like you can at least understand where they're coming from. Kind of like even Thanos in Infinity War. That's one thing that I love what they did with the character is it.
You can perfectly understand where he's coming from. He makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
I mean, still evil, but it makes sense.
Especially when it's like when he gets the gauntlet and it's like, well, he basically has like unlimited power basically. So it's kind of like maybe he could just improve the standard of living across the galaxy instead of wiping out half the population. But since he's a villain, obviously he's not going to be like, all right, time to do some great charity work. He's like, well, half of the universe dead. But even still, I thought he was a really compelling villain, and again, you don't agree with him, but you can still be like, okay, I can see where you're coming from in your warped, evil mind. But yeah. Since we're going on about like 45 minutes, were there anything else you wanted to, favorite comics or characters or anything like that you wanted to mention before we start wrapping this up?
Can't think of something right now. So...
Or do you have any particular reading recommendations, like comics that you've really been digging lately that you'd like to recommend to people?
I think I've covered most in the conversation already.
Alrighty. Which I do think we've given out some pretty good recommendations for both Marvel, DC, indie stuff, especially curse words. I can't recommend that one enough. Or anything written by Brian K. Vaughan. You really can't go wrong. Which, I guess, speaking of, you recently applied for the Indie AF Club, didn't you?
Yeah, true.
Yeah, so hopefully...
Yeah, as I said, I should have been a member already, man. I mostly read my indie stuff at the moment, so...
Well, hopefully we can add you amongst our the ranks of indie AF members. And that goes for anybody else as well listening to this. Like, you can still apply. Because we're a relatively small group. I think there's like maybe 6 or 7 of us. And again, like the whole thing is to like spread indie love to you people, because indie comics are amazing. And I could go on and on about indie comics and how amazing they are. But yeah, that's probably a video for another time. But I think we'll wrap this recording up. So is there any blogs or anything like that you're working on you'd like to promote or anything like that?
I mean, I have my own website called comiccurrents.nl, but I don't really have time for it at the moment, so that's a bit of a shame. I do hope to pick up the Instagram account I have for it soon, though. Yeah, I just post pictures there of my comic collection. So if you're curious, you can go add me on Instagram, which is just Comic Current.
So is that basically what both the Instagram and the website? You're just like posting about your comic collection?
No, the website was mostly news related, so really just news about comics and the like.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, you can't run a news website on your own, especially when you have a job. It's just too much work. So unfortunately, I had to give that up for the moment.
I think it'd still be worth checking out for anyone interested. I'll be sure to leave links to.
I should mention probably that it's in Dutch, so most people probably can't read it.
Okay, well, if you speak Dutch or if you want to pick up Dutch, then you can check out her website.
Or Google Translate.
Oh yeah. That's the beauty with technology. So yeah, you can Google Translate or pick up Duolingo and start learning some Dutch. But I think that just about wraps this up, and you all can always follow me here, obviously on Comics Amino at Irishmanjake. You can also follow me on Twitter at Irishmanjake. Same thing, one word, everything's lowercase. I occasionally tweet on there. And you can also check out my own YouTube channel that I just recently uploaded my Infinity War review. First video I've uploaded on there in like a month. So hopefully I'm going to start getting back on there. And yeah, don't really have anything particular that I'm working on Comics Amino that I know of at the top of my head. But you all can just follow me and keep up with what I'm reading and all that stuff. But thanks for tuning in, everybody. Hopefully you all have enjoyed. And if you all have any ideas for guests to be on here for conversations like this, or if you all want me to interview some of the other curators, let me know, and I'll pester them enough to hopefully come on here and let me interview them. But that wraps us up, and until next time, everyone, cheers.